Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome to my show today on Sadai Haq. I hope you guys are doing well. Today is a Sunday. The date is the 27th of January. We're coming close to an end of the month. I hope nothing but the best for all of you. I would first and foremost want to thank every single one of you for watching the show and for supporting us throughout getting close to really our finishing our first year at Sadai Haq. As some of you who are really new um, to knowing us and our show, just so I can recap some of the stuff that I had stated earlier on. We are close to a year. I actually thought I did hit my 1 year at Sadai Haq, but we did not. I think this was about a month ago. So I came to a realization that I had gotten a notification from my phone stating that I had hit 1 year, but in all reality, I hit a year, just being and coming on TV. That was actually my initial point. But starting off, my appearance here at the show, what we call is life, what is known as life, called ژوندون and Zindagi, here at Sadai Haq is getting close to a year. So as we get closer again, next month we will hit a full year. That is when I will go ahead and then kind of start recapping my topics of what was discussed throughout the year, and how the year went for us. Alhamdulillah, the year has gone by really good. A lot of us are, a lot of folks have been engaged and asking us to talk about certain topics and scenarios for the community, for the importance of of discussions that really were really importantly were number one topic that was really supported and was asked for us to talk about was the youth. And that's something that I've been trying to focus and put a lot of my energy into. And I've been trying to do that, the best of my ability as I can. Again, if there's something that I have missed, if you guys think that I have not been able to properly relate my message or have come to, come to a conclusion of, given a certain topic of discussion on a certain topic as well, please do let me know. You guys have always been very supportive. I've always been very thankful for your support, and please continuously help and support us, as we do need your support in going forward in this big project as well. Dear brothers and sisters, let's get started. So today's topic is going to be, just so we can start off, even before I start off talking about what are the topics of discussion in today's show. Before I can even do that, I just wanted to kind of talk to you guys and say that today there's going to be a lot going on. And the reason why there's going to be a lot going on, number one, is that I had mentioned last time around that I'm going to start to make some changes in my show where I'm going to start including, cartoons and animations for children. When it comes to Islamic studies, a lot of us, a lot of Muslims in the community are really unaware of historical documents, historical facts. I try to touch bases and brush up on those specific scenarios of, anything that I discuss or I talk about, any topics of discussions that I have. I usually coordinate or connect that to mental health. That is my forte. That is my professionalism and my profession. To discuss and talk about mental health. And in that, I try to do my best to include an Islamic fiqh behind it. See if I can get any information or scriptures from the Quran, from the Hadith, from the Siras of the Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and not just that, but I try to do my best to really portray videos that I find from actual scholars and alims to make it easier for you guys, so you guys are well aware of the information, so that way that anything that I discuss or anything that I talk about is channeling through and coming to you from a professional, not just from myself, who's a professional in mental health and behavioral health, but this is somebody who's giving information about Islamic fiqh. So I hope that is working well. But again, excuse me, I had discussed and talked about that I will also incorporate a lot of cartoon that goes and talks about that talks about the Islamic journey of the prophets that came along, the journey of Islam, the history of Islam. So currently, then last week we started off with talking about Adam alayhi salam. Today's cartoon, which I will play later towards my end of my show would be, on Noah, the story of Noah. So please stay tuned, as again, this, I will have a lot of mixtures of different things that I want to include in today's show, just so we can get started and talk about what is today's topic will, consist of. So dear brothers and sisters, today's topic will consist of grief and loss. One of the most important factors that we do not tend to really come to terms for a very long time after someone in our life usually passes away. It either be a loved one, our partners, family members, friends, somebody that like for instance your neighbors, somebody you met at work. So there's a period of a long time of denial, anger, frustration, bargaining. You falling into depressions, you start having suicidality, wanting to kill yourself as well, thinking that life has no meaning to it. Or what ends up happening is that when a lot of folks are given the proper support or given the proper tool, they're actually able to, get out of the phase of darkness and distress, and they come out and they actually come to a realization of accepting the fact that, death is given to us. There's two things that that we have no control over: coming to this world and going back. Just like as it says in Islam, "Inna Allahi wa inna ilahi rajiun." It is He who gives us life, and it is He who must we go back to. So, again, just to brush up on that and talk more about it, I hope I give you guys a better understanding of grief and loss and what is the process like for all of us, and not just that, but what can we do better to help ourselves, better help our community, our family members go through the process of grief and loss. When someone is dead, how do you proceed by going through the process of life itself? So, dear brothers and sisters, I have mentioned earlier on throughout my shows and earlier discussions as well. Please try to do your best. If you guys can give me a call, it is much better. That way, especially in today's topic, I really encourage you guys to give me, phone calls. You guys do engage in discussions. I get a lot of discussions, a lot through Facebook as well, or I even get it through my text messaging as well, because I have given my number where folks, they just text me their question or they'll email it to me. So today's discussion topic will also, be very, it would be very much in tune with, somebody that something that a lot of us have gone through, as someone has experienced, somebody in the family dying, right? Or somebody, who has passed away. So in today's topic, what we want to do is that, whatever I say today, it's going to be a very touchy topic. It's going to hit home run in terms that it's going to be very relatable for children and youth that are unaware of, what is the process of, grief and loss. Why is it that my parents, they tend to cry a lot? My siblings, my older siblings are crying, or I'm crying. Today is a good topic in learning about grief and loss. And I talk about, signs, symptoms of, what you're feeling, why you're going through this process and procedures, and what can we do better as individuals and as communities and families to help one another and move, and not just, as we say, not to move on with life, but also to be able to adjust in a situation that has taken place, being able to accept the fact that, an incident has taken place, and then by accepting that situation, we're able to implement and go further and be able to live our lives by coping, by being able to positively cope with that loss. So that's what we're going to talk about. So please, again, I will highly encourage you guys to please give me a phone call and do share your thoughts, because a lot of people do go through the process of grief and loss. They have a hard time adjusting to it. A lot of people have a fear of death. There's a lot of people, there's a couple of folks that I've known personally that actually talk about they're scared of death, and it's like, it's a part of life. It's a part of life, and it's part of accepting that life, And there's two things, like I mentioned earlier, that we have no control over, life and then death. That's something that is not in our hands, and it can happen at any time or point in life as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and talk about also the process. First, I'm going to talk about the process of death. grief and loss of a family member and what should be done through, in that process. Then I'm gonna go ahead and make my way into the funeral services. What that looks like. There's a lot of there's more going on, in terms of finances, in terms of family discussions of where do I want to take my deceased family member. Do I want to keep him here? Do I want to take him back to my home country? Just kind of trying to talk about those barriers as well. What the family should do and what they what should be done. And then from there, even if you are to go ahead and bury your deceased family member here amongst yourself, what does the process look like? There's times where people they try to make fences, put a big board, concrete plaque on the grave, so people don't step on it. What is their meaning behind that? Is I'm gonna share those, and then what happens when a person dies, with the soul and the body, through certain videos of Islamic videos that I have added on to this. So it gives you guys a better understanding of what should be done and what can we do as Muslims, as people, of even different avenues as well. So again, dear brothers and sisters, let's get started in today's show. And again, if you guys have anything else discussing too, please try to keep it in English when you guys send me anything on Facebook. It becomes very easy. Because the show is in English and it makes it much easier for me to relay it back to you guys in that. So again, life after after loss, dealing with grief. What is that? Loss is an inevitable part of life, and grief is a natural part of the healing process too, right? So again, loss is just a part of life. What can a person loses their lives, or they die. It's just it's a genuinely normal thing. As for us Muslims, we have no control over that. That is something that we are to accept or have to come to terms with. When it comes to following Islam, is that life. We do end up losing the people we love. We actually even are in tune of actually accepting the fact that we are also going to pass away as well. And then the grief is a natural part of the process of healing. The grief is more family members or yourself crying over your family members, trying to make du'as for them, or holding an event to by gathering people for khatams and making du'as. Those are the grieving process of it. The reasons for grief are many, such as the loss of loved ones, the loss of health, or the letting go of the long-held dream as well. Dealing with significant loss can be one of the most significant times in a person's life as well, brothers and sisters. And you have to remember there's different kinds of losses, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about what are certain losses or different kind of losses that we need to look out for. Number one, there's feelings of loss are very personal. First and foremost, that's something that we have to understand, and only you know what is significant to you as well. For instance, if I have if I had a relative or a family member die, it is more relevant to me, on what it is like, or the feelings that I have. It's only connected towards that person of the death or the deceased. So my buddy will not feel the same pain as I will, for instance, right? Because it's just like it's like, for instance, I come up to you and I pinch you. You go through pain. You're the person next to you is not gonna feel that pain because they don't know what you're going through, right? Because I physically come and I pinch you. When a person dies, it spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, you go through a process of pain, and not just that, but even physically, psychologically, when you have those, when you get distressed when a person does passes away, it's like you having something in your life and it's no longer there. So what you end up doing is that you start looking and you start searching for something, right? Let's say what happens is if you're at home, if you are an adult, you put your keys somewhere, you panic and you're like, where's my keys? You start looking around, and you might even start yelling. You might even blame some of the family members, or your spouse or your kids, or just trying to find out where you put your keys. And that's a form of distress, and it's like you have lost something, right? Or if you're a child, you're at a store, or you're and let's say you're 2, 3, or even 5 years old, You go to a store with your mother or your father, the next thing you know, they get out of your sight and they're in the next aisle over. You will freak out. You get scared. So the same way, this is how grief and loss feels. You know, you have somebody in your family has passed away, and now you have that feeling of somebody not being there anymore. So you're trying to constantly try to search for that person. Where is that person? Well, am I gonna get a call? Am I not gonna get a call back? Like, you start missing that individual, and that is a normal feeling. That is an individual's normal feeling. So don't feel like that is abnormal. That is normal. Till time goes on, until you're able to better cope with yourself. Now, people commonly associate certain losses with strong feelings of grief. These can consist of certain or multiple things. For instance, death of a partner. For instance, a husband losing a wife, or a wife losing a husband. It's a very it usually becomes very difficult, especially for our seniors. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but research has shown that usually when a husband and wife, as they get older, people in society tend to talk less to them. As they deteriorate, they're not going out into community anymore. They're in more need of, the seniors are usually at home because they cannot go outside. So for that, when they stay home, they're away from the community. The community does not know much about them. So if one partner of theirs die, it plays a big effect on the father, or on the grandfather or the grandmother. Reason why? Because usually you would have your kids, but guess what? Your kids now are married. They have kids. They have other responsibilities they have to take care of. You do not get the same companionship as you would with your partner. So for that, a lot of seniors, they have a lot of social isolation. They have nobody there to take them out, or they don't have anybody to talk to. Usually grandparents, when they're there, when they're together, they're usually there to provide companionship for one another, to be there for one another when nobody's there. So it constantly keeps them going, physically, emotionally, mentally. They're constantly talking to each other. They have feelings and thoughts being shared, stories of their past being shared, and they go around. But once that person is no longer there, what happens is that the person really separates and has no one else to talk to, because they have lost somebody very important in their lives. So for that, it becomes very difficult for our seniors. And what research and what it has stated is that our seniors are one of the, alongside our youth, they are also in the top two, leading cause of death among suicide. So seniors killing themselves, the rates are very high, is because of not having anybody next to them. And that's something we have to know, brothers and sisters. We have to know that our seniors are also in need of support. We also need to have programs for them, so they're able to go ahead and talk to different folks in the community. I know a lot of family members, they tend to not take their seniors out, or they usually have them inside the house. A senior does not need to be in the house full time. You have to remember, a senior that stays in the house at the same time usually then becomes an argumental issue inside the household. So for that, what is one of the best process or thought process is that we need to take our seniors, when it comes to our grandparents, we need to have them be active in the community. You take them to the masajids, you take them to community centers, you take them to adult day health centers. It's not an adult day care center. It's not where you take your parents and you leave them in a house or in a nursing home. It is an adult day health center where they go and they spend 5 hours of their day daily. In the morning while you go to work, they go and they interact with other people, and they have different programs set up for them, right? They make sure that they do an assessment of their biopsychosocial, to make sure that your grandparents do not deteriorate when it comes to their psychological and their physical and their verbal speech. It does not deteriorate. It either stays sustaining or it actually increases over time, and that can also help when it comes to memory. Like their long-term memory, short-term memory deficits. If they're oriented to person, place, time, or thing, those are important factors that we have to be considerate of, and we have to make sure that our our grandparents have those companionships, or at least they're in a scenario or in a setting where they have adults that can take care of them as well. The other things that we want to talk about in different kinds of losses are, again, loss of a family member, right? That's also very tragic. Having your parents around, and then the next day, your parents are no longer there, and that becomes a very strong psychological factor that actually causes a lot of grievance, pain for a child. Even if you're an adult child of your parent, it becomes very difficult for you because you've had your parents all your life. The people that are closest to you are no longer there. How are you going to deal with it? So that is something that that a lot of us struggle with, when it comes to the first stages of grief and loss. Is we are in that denial stage, we are in the bargaining stage, we're in the anger stage of arguing and bargaining with God, with ourselves, with our family members. Why did you have to die? Why wasn't I there to help? Why couldn't I missed out on spending more time with you? Those are all the things that those scenarios or things that we actually discuss and talk about psychologically to ourselves. The other thing we want to talk about is, again, relatives. There's loss of close friends, your actual friends, even coming back to seniors. The reason why I want to talk and discuss mainly about seniors is a lot of seniors have this, they have the highest rate of suicide, and the reason why they do that is because they are socially isolated from the community. They have nobody else in terms of family there, because usually in today's world, when you have family in let's say in the States, in the United States or in Europe, I know usually I'll talk about the States here and United States mainly, when it comes to here also in California, but specifically in the United States, both husband and wife usually works. Majority of the time, the husband and wife are working. So when the parents are there, it's not like back home in Afghanistan where you have the child in the house, or your in-law, your daughter-in-law in the house. No, both the husband and wife are working. Your son and your daughter-in-law is going to work because of high cost of living in the States, and depending on where you live too, especially. So they're working. Your grandkids are in school. They come back. They're in other activities. They're in sports team. They're in after-school programs. They're in Islamic schools. They go to their friend's house. These are things that that are very much different than it is back in your own home country. You cannot go out of the house and talk to your neighbors easily because they don't speak Pashto, they don't speak Dari, they speak English, they speak Spanish, they speak Russian, they speak Portuguese. Like, well, what are you going to do when that happens, right? So that makes it even difficult. So it's a barrier on top of another barrier. And what ends up happening is that when you have a close friend of yours that dies, even if you're when you hit ages 60 and above, what ends up happening is that you are now in a category of you've passed your adulthood, you're in your high adulthood, in your senior years. But what ends up happening is that when you start seeing a lot of your friends start deteriorating, they start having health problems, they start having terminal illnesses, they start passing away. That also psychologically causes a lot of demotivation for you in your life, that causes you a lot of health issues. So psychologically, when that causes you fear and that causes you pain, and you know that your friends are passing, and now you're looking at yourself and you're saying, oh wow, like I can be next any day. So now you're living in a world of constant fear of not knowing when you're going to die. So that is also that is taking place with our seniors. And that's why usually I'm going to discuss mainly and talk about our seniors and elderlies, because they have the hardest time here when it comes to being in the States. Again, there can be a death of a classmate or colleague. You have serious illnesses of of a loved one. Family members having terminal illness that cannot be cured. Again, like I said, one of the my own personally, I have other family members who had passed away. Most recently, my mother-in-law, may Allah grant her Jannah and peace be upon her and her family and all of our families, is that she had a terminal illness as well, and that it becomes very difficult for us to to be able to help cure that, because there's really no cure for it other than just praying for her and making dua for her and spending time for her. That is all that you can do, right? But it's still something than nothing. It's still something. And then again, you have relationships as well. And then when it comes to relationship breakups, there's one as well that I want to discuss. So this is when you have loss a lot of youth and youngsters and a lot of our young adults who are actually in relationships when it comes to, the Muslim community or the Afghan community. We all, there's a lot of our youngsters are in relationships with other people, with other, Muslims in the community. So what ends up happening is that, either they are, in school, they're seeing somebody, or they're, are engaged, or they, parents have arranged them with others. But once there's a separation of a relationship, right then and there is a lot of couples, they go through a very difficult time of coming to a realization that, they actually are no longer together. So for that, a lot of people think that, if a guy or a girl is still going out mainly and is going in, one of the case scenarios that I had recently was one from our South Asian community. I had one of the sisters who came in. She was in a relationship that was very abusive. So she ended up, having a lot of grief of, why did I put myself into this situation? And then the husband, who they're not separated yet legally, but they're separated physically and emotionally, sexually. So they are separated. So for him, he's going out to parties. So I was talking to her and I told her, I was like, well, let me tell you something. That is his form of coping, is to go out and enjoy himself. He's not happy either. But the fact that he's going out constantly every day and just taking care, trying to cope with it, that's his form of coping, And whatever else he does afterwards, that is his way of coping. But it's not that, he is also going through the same process. It's not that he's happy. That is how it makes him, it just brings us a little bit happiness to a certain moment of time. Once he's back home, he's alone, you're not there, it becomes very difficult. Same thing for the sister. Same thing works for the sister as well. Again, let's continue more on some of the losses. For instance, a person leaving home. So the process of leaving home is also very challenging, especially when it comes to, I will talk more mainly with the Afghan community, also with certain Muslim communities, especially when it comes to South Asian communities. When I talk about grief and loss, this doesn't just mean a person just dying. So now I'm going to go ahead and talk about people who are alive within the household. When you have children who actually leave the house, they get a job, they go out to a different state, and they have a job, they get a job. Let's say, for instance, they in California, they get a job in Sacramento. In California, they get a job in, I'm like, Sacramento, right? Capital. They go to Florida. A family has a hard time accepting the fact that the child is gone. So they go through a process of grieving. The mother and the father have a very difficult time. Even the siblings, not too much, but the parents have a very much, they have a very difficult time. Or when a child is married, either be a boy or a girl, when they leave the house and they start to build their own house, as to be able to build a community for themselves, or to have their children, have their own life with their own spouses. Parents, they have a hard time detaching from that, because psychologically, they've also culturally, brothers and sisters, this is not religiously, where a person or a family lives together. This is a cultural factor, where we psychologically already make pre-planned things, but then when something doesn't go your way, it hits you very hard, because you were not ready. You did not follow the simple way out, but it was more of a cultural factor or barrier that you really put on yourself. What is this person going to say? What is that family going to say? That's going to cause you a lot of grief and loss. That's where you see a lot of parents, especially parents, they start struggling. When it comes to South Asians, especially when South Asians, it's really big in two communities that I know big time. It's the Afghan community, all of us, from Afghanistan, people from Pakistan, very big. These communities have a very difficult time when a child goes and starts, moving out because of work, because of marriage, there might be a fight in the house. There's different factors, but family members, they have a hard time coping with it. Or usually what ends up happening is that even the child itself wants to even get out, have its own place, and that becomes a different issue, but that's a different topic in itself. But again, let's talk about, again, we talked about loss of health, um, death of, in today's world, I've come to a realization and an understanding that animals are very important to certain people. And usually when an animal passes away, people even have grief and losses. And this very much applies to the Muslim community and us as well. So that's also a part of it. Change of job, that becomes very difficult. Leaving your job that you love because you have to go back to, let's say, your home country because your parents aren't doing well, right? You have to go back because somebody in your family's ill, or you have to go back and you have to quit job because your spouse is ill, your child's ill. You have to take those into consideration, and that becomes a very difficult time process for you. Moving to a new home is also very different. It is very difficult. Some people, they feel very depressed when they go to a new house because they came out of an environment, with one environment, till they start to learn to adjust in the new house. It's very crazy. But even myself sometimes, when I was actually talking to my wife, because we had so when we first moved in together, it was very difficult because coming from a house that was very, we had brothers and sisters and parents, always constantly running around, especially with my brother and sisters always yelling. And so I knew there was always people in the house. So I remember when I got married, and when we had our own place, it became a little bit difficult in the beginning because my wife would be at school or at work. Every time I come home, I would be alone and I would feel depressed for some reason, and that was because my mind was still somewhere with my parents and my brothers and sisters, till I was able to learn to adjust to the new setting. And that takes time. It is, it does take time. It becomes difficult in the beginning, but it becomes very easy at the end, right? So you have to work through it. You cannot just make it difficult. Just, oh no, I can't live without this person, so I'm gonna not do this. Again, there's a lot of times I've seen a lot of people in the community who has not moved forward in their professional life because they cannot get out of the house because they psychologically don't have the drive or the will to move out. So that makes it very challenging for them too. So please try to be well prepared for that. You've got graduating from school. Kids. If anybody who's in middle school, who's in elementary school, when you are graduating, it becomes, there's two things, right? You're happy and you're nervous because you're happy because you're finally going to a new school. Your parents are happy, your friends are happy, but you're kind of scared and sad because you might not no longer see your friends, right? Because once you go to middle school and high school, a lot of your friends kind of go into different schools. A lot of them, they move into different cities, different states. You are now going from an eighth grader to a freshman. Now you're starting really brand new again in a high school that you don't know anybody, and that becomes a scary process for you. But it shouldn't. It should be a fun process and an easy process for you. Change is always good. You learn. So don't ever think that because you are doing something that you have never done before, that doesn't mean. So a lot of people that do a lot of changes in their life, they're actually growing very well, versus somebody who doesn't change. Because when you don't change and you stay in one place, you have a lot of fear. That is what ends up happening, is that you have a fear of letting go, and you have a fear that of just being there, and you're just very comfortable. It's always good. Even studies have shown that it is very important that a person, even if you're working, every 5 years you should be able to change jobs or settings, or at least in the same job be able to move up or do different things, or bring up different innovative ideas where you're appreciated and you're able to do more for the community, for yourself, because those are important factors. Again, loss of physical ability. Before you were able to go ahead and do things, physically you were able to go out, you were able to hang out with your friends. Now you can no longer do that. So that becomes a different scenario as well. And then now let's talk about loss of financial security. This is also very fearful and very scary. A lot of times you'll see people, having money. So there's a story of where I used to live back in Torrance. Give me a second, folks. So back at home, in Torrance, there was a family of a man who was who did business. He was living a very good life, and he had lived with his parent. He was with his parents. taking care of them, but he was not married. Once the business started doing bad, and he knew that the his financial situation was really bad. The only thing that I was not able to follow up because I had other things. This was like years ago. I was in school, in graduate school. So, so what I've noticed was that I had saw him on the streets, where he was smoking, and his whole, attire changed. His demeanor. He was talking to himself. He had established schizophrenia. He's got on drugs, and that was due to financial situation, not being able to cope well on how to readjust your finances, or be able to consult with other people of your financial challenges. You hit a point where you start doing things. For instance, a lot of people, they go into drugs, right? So this brother had got into drugs where, in order for him to cope with his financial stability, where that was no longer the situation, because if you're well aware that daily in the back of your head, that you're losing money, that's going to cause a lot of problems for you psychologically, because if you're not accepting the fact that you're just losing money, you need to do something different. What you end up doing is that you're just saying, what, I'm just going to hope for the best, but I'm going to go ahead and occupy myself by maybe starting something like, which is very negative, is doing drugs. So when you start doing drugs, your mind is off of your finances and you're doing drugs. Eventually what you come to realize is that you're causing more damage to yourself, and your finances are just going down and down, and nothing is solved. And it makes things even worse for you, so it becomes very difficult, brothers and sisters. So again, sudden versus so let's do this. I know I'm just going through the whole process of grief and loss. So what I'll do is I'm gonna go on a quick break, and then when we come back, we're just gonna continue with our program as we go further on.
It needs strong roots. Today, more than 350,000 babies will be born. That's about 4 kids for every second. And similar to the tree, some children have strong roots, some are weak, and some don't have roots at all. They didn't ask to be born, or rather, they didn't get to choose their home. These are the things that we just don't have control over. There are rootless, homeless, refugees, immigrant families, and many less fortunate seeking services in our underserved community who never felt that they ever had a home in the first place. That's why now, more than ever, we need your support. Come to our 2019 gala to enjoy an evening of relaxation and entertainment for the whole family that will help provide financial support toward Access Cal's vital health and human services. Purchase your tickets today at accesscal.org.
Welcome back, dear brothers and sisters. So let's get started again and go further with the grief and loss scenario. I know I got a couple of comments on Facebook, which I'll read your questions and I'll answer them and your suggestions. But I'm just going to go through the PowerPoint and my presentations for now, and my today's talk of discussion. But I will get to your question as well. Again, there's a lot going on. I have good videos that I want to share with you guys, but at the same time, I want to be able to interact with you as well. So again, we talked about sudden versus predictable losses as well. There's times where the people actually suddenly die. That also it's also a strong factor as well in folks, people's life. Sudden or shocking losses due to events like crime, accidents or suicide can be very traumatic, and that does take place, right? Not knowing, there's a crime, scene that takes place, and then someone takes out a gun or a knife and accidentally hits somebody that you love, somebody who's dear to you, and is shot or is killed, which is horrible, which is, very wrongdoing. But we know, even in today's world, that we see a lot of gun violence. If I'm not mistaken, I believe there was another shooting or so at a church of a young man that was arrested. I believe it was 21 injured or killed. I haven't fully read the news yet, but there's something that took place just recently here. I just have to do my. I'll just when we go and do the videos through our video topics, I will go ahead and maybe pull up that news as well, and kind of to see what went on. If not that, somebody or one of my co-hosts And so that help will cover the news as well. So please bear with us. Um, Again, usually when those incidents takes place, accidental incidents, people could have heart attacks, not knowing strokes. You wouldn't know. You have symptoms, but sometimes we lack the education of what are the signs and symptoms, because at times we don't even go out and learn ourselves, to educate ourselves on, I need to go into a health seminar. I need to go into a behavioral health seminar. So when we come out, or professionals come out to you and says, we are here to help, provide a seminar for you, please take them seriously. This is not because, people are coming out and trying to make money or trying to make fame. If people are into that, you should know it, and you should just, up to you if you want to come or not. But it's very beneficial, because a lot of times when people do come out and they do speak, they want to come and do the best that they can to help the community, to help people that are unaware of risk factors and challenges that a lot of us are not aware of, right? So if I come out, for instance, if I do behavioral health, a talk on behavioral health, I give a talk on suicide. That's because I have the findings and the stats, and I have therapy sessions with actual suicidal clients and families, and people that actually have lost those in a suicide attempt as well. So I have the expertise, so I can help the family and the community understand on, if there's somebody in the family that does have suicidal thoughts or ideations, or if you have any suicidal thoughts or ideation, what you need to do. There's a plan to it. So please, these are important factors, and I always encourage you guys to please take important scenarios into consideration, because these can help us. This can help us build and become more stronger and be more unified with ourselves, our families, in our relationships with our spouses, with our parents, with our children. They're very important. So please take it very considerate and very serious if you guys can. Again, they can challenge your sense of security and confidence in predicting